Trump is an acquired taste. People like some of the stuff that he does, and don't like some of the stuff that he does. There are some things that he says that I would wholeheartedly agree. For example, he said a few months ago that the Chinese think about the long term. Companies, which we've touched on in this interview, think about 3 months, and that's too short. And he said we should get rid of quarterly reporting. Maybe report every 6 months or every year if you're a listed company. And I think that's right. So he comes out with some jewels. Now, do I necessarily agree that tariffs are a good thing? From a global point of view, maybe from a US point of view. He can point to, he has a long-term deficit problem, and imposing tariffs and getting a better balance of trade might be one of the ways that he thinks, and Scott Bessent thinks, they can address that issue in the longer term. We'll have to see how that plays out. As a globalist, do I think tariffs are necessarily a good thing for the world? No. I think free trade is a better way for us to develop policy. So there are things that Trump says and does, but you have to hand it to him. The guy is a genius in terms of, he had one term, he lost in inverted commas. He would claim he didn't lose the election to intervening election in Biden, and won it again against a lot of what people said. I mean, the first election in 2016, nobody gave him a chance. He won that election, and I think the second time around, people were hesitant to give him. Some were hesitant to give him a chance. I don't think Kamala Harris was a particularly effective opponent, a Democratic opponent, and he won again. And so you have to hand it to him from a political point of view, whether you call it populist or whatever. He appeals not so much to the West Coast and the East Coast, but the stuff in the middle. The stuff that Elon Musk always refers to as, the flyover US. And I think you have to hand it to him that politically he's been extremely astute. On Modi, from my perspective, he's one of the best leaders that we see in the world. If you were asking me to identify the strongest leaders in the world, he would be right up there. I think he understands brand India. He understands projecting India's influence and power around the world. So I think he's done a great job in terms of promoting and developing the Indian brand. I mean, if I think back to the UK, Cameron and Clegg came in for a lot of criticism from some quarters, but David Cameron, who was originally a PR guy, publicly, he understands that. He understood brand UK, and interestingly, he and subsequently Clegg, when they were jointly leading a government, put into place advertising programs, the Great Britain campaign, which actually are models for sort of country branding and country advertising, I think now, because what they did was they insist that every minister obeyed the template they put together. So I think Modi is really interesting from the point of view of promoting brand India, gaining respect for brand India, and the growth of the Indian economy, and its position in the world is forever improving. And as I said to you before, by 2050, it'll be the third largest economy in the world. It's already the world's most populous country. That doesn't mean there aren't challenges. Traveling around Mumbai is, as we know, is an effort. But it's a country in transition. The problem is it has existing infrastructure, which has to be taken care of at the same time as you're building new infrastructure. I was recently in Abu Dhabi and in Saudi, in the UAE and Saudi, and the advantage they have is they're building new infrastructure, but they don't have to dismantle a lot of old infrastructure that they've been saddled with. So it is totally new, and if you look at what they are doing on a smaller scale, but in those regions, it's quite incredible the vision that, for example, Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi, or the UAE, the seven UAE states have, is quite extraordinary.